ARG, Not Another Podcast About Book Publishing, hosted by William May, in which the author finds himself embroiled in a podcast about book publishing.
Hey everyone, welcome to ARG episode 14, where we are going to we actually did already interview Julie Trelstad about AI and the process of creatives.
It's always interesting.
Yeah.
The way that, like, when you're doing a piece of work like this, the linearity, the sort of cycle of creation, that it's like people are going to listen to this first, but it's really the ending.
I love that. I always have an intro in the end of our conversation. So we didn't want to forget about something, and it's a pretty big deal that I kind of wanted you to share and thank about your nomination.
Yeah, I'm very excited. One of the poems, it's a poem that's in my book, Plays Without Burning. It's a poem called Gone. And it was just nominated for a Pushcart Award. The poem was published in Paddock Review, and Leah Maines from Paddock Review chose my poem out of a lot of work. And I really just want to say thank you, and to her, to everyone at Paddock Review, and to all of you who read my work in general. Not that, you directly had it, but I can't help but feel like there's some good energy out there. As Maggie said, we're going to be talking with Julie Trelstad, who's an AI publishing sort of liaison, I suppose is a good word for it. And it was definitely an interesting conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, so we're here with Julie Trelstad, as Maggie was talking about. And I know, Julie, before we get into your current position, talking about AI, which I'm skeptical about myself personally, and we can get into the specifics of some of my concerns, which are I think, fairly broad. But before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about your background in publishing. And I know that you have, been in this industry for a long time before you got into the technological side. At least that's my understanding of it. Although there's been a lot of technology throughout publishing for a very long time, including the argument that technology itself is one of the fundamental drivers of modern technology as a technology that came out hundreds of years ago. But that's a whole other historical argument, I suppose.
Indeed. Yeah, I feel like my career specifically, I've been riding the wave of technology in publishing, because my very first job was I studied architecture in school, but my first job was in an architecture. What? Yeah, really cool. It's a logical step to publishing, but I got my first job at an architectural magazine, and when I started there, we did have a computer in the office, but it had that phone-up modem. And we submitted via that phone line our copy at the end of every week. And then we would get a big package in the mail with the galleys, all the strips of like text that we had to cut up. And we cut it with scissors and we pasted it on the wall. Within 6 months of starting that job, Quark Express came along and desktop publishing began. And at the time, I was actually doing architecture technology. Computer-aided design was new for architects. And that actually led me to a very early career in magazine and book publishing, where I was a technology writer for the emerging architecture technology at architecture and design magazines, but also, ironically, using technology. I ultimately ended up at John Wiley & Sons, which is like a storied publisher in the 90s. And I got to be one of the first people to work on ebooks for them. And we were doing it on CD-ROM. And they didn't really see the future, because they thought that at the time that CD-ROMs were going to be more expensive than books. So if a book was going to sell for $20, you were going to buy the ebook for $100 or more, because they imagined it was like software. They were really high on the technology thing. Well, it didn't really work out that way, but So we went there, and then later on, I was one of the first people to work with authors on social media, which was what I was doing at Writers House, the literary agency. I actually helped them with their self-publishing and ebook programs, where we were dealing with authors who had rights like pre-1991, before the publishers sold ebook rights, and what do you do with those? So we worked on that, and then the other project we worked on a lot was like pulling a lot of authors kicking and screaming into doing social media, which I actually, was really difficult. A change in the way authors had to promote themselves, changed publishing probably more than anything else, I think.
Are there any
Yeah.
particular like stories from that period that you feel free to tell,
I'm trying to think of what.
without names necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of authors at the time, like the early ones and like I was brought on largely because there were a lot of authors, the romance authors in particular, had ebook rights, and they were at the point of breaking up with their agents and breaking up with their publishers and really launching out into independent publishing. And I always thought that was, that was always a very awkward thing that was happening, because these particular romance authors were the legacy ones who had built their careers on traditional publishing, and, because of the reputation they already had, of course they did great early on. Same thing with like all these people who were already known figures and celebrities or known writers did really well in social media early, early, early. They built big audiences very fast. And then what's happened over time is like no one's been able to do that at that level because, these were first, they were early in. But it has, the genres really have split out into indie publishing in a way that like literary and poetry and, other kinds of books have not.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things you're talking about is the fact that like these were people who were taking advantage of the fact that they did have that level of success that can only come from being part of a large publishing situation where, I mean, I'm very lucky. My book, Blaze Without Burning, is from a small publisher, but they are distributed through a large distribution company. So they still have, even though in reality, it doesn't mean that Barnes and Nobles all around the country are actually stocking my book.
Yeah.
It's available through those bookstores and through a lot of independent bookstores. So it gives me that reach without having that kind of, support generally in terms of, the kind of support you would get from a place like one of the big five or however many are left. It's three, right?
It's five still, but what's the support you get? Like 95% of authors don't get a lot of support from the big fives. They do get, what they get is distribution, exactly what you're naming. But
I've spoken to authors years ago who had that experience. So I'm curious, what about that led to your current, was there a transition between them or was it?
Yeah, actually, I sort of like, I did learn, I was really running the self-publishing program at a literary agency that didn't want to have a self-publishing program. You know what I mean? And you really want to be doing the best. You want to be representing, you don't want to be the one who is in the basement. But it was like during that time that it evolved that I understood that authors needed more support than they were getting from their agents and their author and their publishers, at least to get started. And like to that point, like what I was saying about social media is that because there was early success with social media, then the publishers started requiring, the big publishers at least, that authors have social media presence, but they weren't necessarily giving the guidance. And it was a big lift for a lot of those authors. So I started a practice and still run it, Paperbacks and Pixels, to coach and help authors develop their own style of marketing themselves.
And that's primarily aimed towards indie writers.
No, about half of my clients are traditionally published. I work with all authors. I feel like the challenge is the same. You need visibility, whether you're a small press, an indie, or you're with Penguin. If you're not one of the top five.
A gap in the marketplace in terms of like how publishers are supporting their authors in general, or is it more that you're offering a larger, more niche, or is it just the level of the authors you're working with?
I don't know if I think it's kind of all of the above. I don't like this, that authors have to do this. You know what I mean? I think the real problem that's happening right now is overpublication across the board and lack of discernment from some presses and a lot of indie stuff, because what we have is a situation right now where there's just so much noise and static that it doesn't really matter how you're published. You have to find your way through. And that's what I think the real problem is right now. I have a lot of, I work with a lot of very different kinds of authors, and that's kind of the universal thing. It's like it's hard to get noticed.
Sure. And from your perspective, how does AI fit into that paradigm?
Yeah, okay, well, two different ways, basically. One is that authors can recruit AI to help them have a bigger presence than they could do on their own. It helps them, but I don't know if this is good or bad, because if everyone's doing it, everyone's doing it. I think it can help them stay on track if they have to do the social media and electronic communication. The new tools with AI are helping authors expand their reach and extend their voices. AI, and if you want to talk about AMLET too, there's like this whole new level of rights. Just like ebook rights became important after 1991, AI is going to be, I don't know what formats are going to be published, but it is now almost 80% of discovery online is coming through people using ChatGPT or AI-enhanced browsers, not even knowing you're using AI. But if, say, somebody's doing research or looking for an author and they ask a chatbot to do it, that chatbot can just deploy between 100 and 1,000 searches looking for things, right? As opposed to a single person writing in Google, where it's what is the best Pushcart nominated poetry I can find. So there's this AI is vastly enhancing the amount of searches that can be done. I guess this is terrifying, but what it means for authors is you need to, again, find a way. It's even more noise that you have to cut through. But, one thing about AI that I've learned using it is that you can use AI to help you get around AI. So it's very ironic, but you can certainly, if you are an author and you want to build a strategy and you're facing these obstacles, using a chatbot or using AI assistance can help you overcome these things and find yourself in a more visible place. And different authors use it in different ways. But I think, it changed search. So for instance, Wikipedia and Reddit are now more important than other sources. Amazon is now using their built-in AI called Rufus to find authors and books for consumers using the platform. So the AI is getting integrated into absolutely everything. So I think it's really important for authors to understand how this works and the kind of tactics and strategies they might use to find their visibility in a world by AI, which is it just reminds me so much of when, again, authors all of a sudden had to be on social media. It's these platforms are adding on top of each other.
Well, I can't help but think about, just earlier today, one of the things that comes to mind when I hear something like this is, I was listening to someone talk about how, Joyce Carol Oates got into a Twitter war with Elon Musk, which is an absurd thing to begin with. And
that's funny.
Trounced him, which is par for the course.
Of course.
Yes. But, part of the issue was that came up was that they basically part of what she said was that Elon Musk clearly doesn't even know how to enjoy life, and he doesn't know, he never talks about anything that he's enjoyed doing or a book that he's read recently that he loves or something like that. He clearly doesn't and of course the fact that she mentioned all these things that he hasn't done, of them all he responds by being of course I read books, but I would never read one of your books, kind of thing. And it's and in the midst of all this, people responding and involved in it because they were talking about Elon Musk and reading started to get responses from Blinkist, because Blinkist has a deal with Elon Musk where they put out a list of Elon Musk's recommended reading. And of course, Blinkist is a company that provides basically AI summaries of books. I mean, is basically what they do. And so like their evidence for like Elon Musk as a reader is somebody sending out AI summaries of books that Elon Musk says he's read. Which, you know, gets into part of the problem of what we're talking about, which is also that like, you know, when you're relying on AI to recommend the books, you're also relying on AI to read the books, which does two things. I mean, that are both, one is, you know, suddenly you have people who it's like, you know, you're never going to win the argument that it's as good to read a Cliff Notes version of a novel as it is to read a real novel. But there are definitely people who will say, well, it's good enough to read the AI Cliff Notes version of a novel. Why? I don't have time to actually read the book, you know, but the AI is smart enough to know what I need to know from it, you know, that kind of thing, which is an argument I'm sure you've heard, you know, being involved in, you know, conversations around this. I'm sure it's something, you know, there are definitely people who will say, and maybe not a novel, but certainly like, you know, I'm sure there are people who are like, well, I didn't have time to read Thomas Piketty, so I read an AI summary of Capital in the 21st century. And it's like,
that's
works.
This is the thing that drives me the craziest about AI right now, actually, is that it's too fast. It's way too fast. Like it just like you ask it a question and it gives you like 10 pages. And then it asks you another question and it tries to keep you engaged and so on. And these are the chatbots that are coming out today. And that's why like I've been thinking a lot about like how much we need poetry so badly right now, because we need to slow down these things. And you know, to your comment about the summaries and Blinkist and everything, it's like I think people, it's also new and it's also shiny and it's also fast that, you know, it's like too much. Like we can't even consume. What are you saying now that we have to read 300 books in every month because we can have the AI summaries? Like that's
how
nuts.
Is that reading 300
How is that reading? It's not, it's just, it's awful. And, you know, one thing I've been thinking about a lot and having conversations with my colleagues around is that the current state of AI that everyone is so cranky about, the AI that's burning down forests and using so much power, and the evolution of the LLMs, you know, first of all, AI has been around since the 50s. You know, we've had a lot, but go ahead.
I mean, obviously we're talking about AI as a general, we're using it as a
yeah.
But really what we're talking about is the modern transformer architecture systems that, you know, built on, you know, the platforms
right now,
like GPT and things like that, where it's, you know, it's specific. I mean, there are definitely people who argue that like a lot of lower level AI systems that are not built on that kind of network and that don't require that kind of, you know, deep power to run are very good and useful in ways that, you know, can be very, very much influential in our society if we put them to use, but are also like, well, with these systems, for a lot of reasons are not. And I mean, one of them is the sort of black box nature of it. But I mean, it goes into, you know, as you said, you know, the environmental concern is definitely a real thing. And I mean, we're also now talking about, you know, sort of an economic concern with the fact that like so many companies that like are fundamentally like holding up our entire economy are basically doing it on the bet that one day they can figure out a way that all this will actually make them money, you know. And it's like they're spending billions on building the infrastructure in the same way that, I mean, in a certain way, it reminds me of WeWork, you know, that company that opened
I used to work in a WeWork. Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, they open 1 million office spaces for people who are going to come and have jobs and create a society in their space. And there's no reason for them to, because there's no place for them to, no work for them to do in those buildings to begin with. It's just a bunch of infrastructure for people who aren't going to actually be able to do it, except like some people who spend some money to do it so that they feel like they're actually involved with something, you know?
I guess, yeah, totally. And I feel, but I think it is important because you understand that there's several kinds of AI, and
Right.
The real problem right now are these large language models that are just like, they're like voracious cookie monsters, just like eating everything they can.
I agree with you, but I would point out that it's, I mean, and I'm not saying this to you, I think you understand this, but when we say large language models, it's worth pointing out to our listeners that it's not limited to things that are writing, but also that like the image generators, the music
Right.
generators, that these are all based
Exactly.
on the same technology, and that fundamentally it's the use of the token, which can be music, can be visual, it can be literature, in this kind of transformer, as I called it, architecture. That's, I mean, basically what you're talking about is something that like uses a very large set of information to create a statistical model of what is
Exactly.
the most likely outcome from this piece of input,
Yeah.
given, you know, the
And
possibility space.
right. And all the value that people are finding in it right now is a direct result of the fact that it scraped world literature, that it
Right.
scraped our art, it scraped,
And
the
I mean, this is,
as
to be honest,
piracy.
to
Yeah.
go back to something you were talking about before, this is one of my concerns with trying to make yourself as visible as possible to
I
the
know.
AIs. Because the moment that you're being looked at by the AI, you're also now being looked at by the AI. And so it's going to, you know,
You can't
it's like,
hide.
you know, it's like if it knows you are there, it can tell people to find you, but it also is then scraping you in the same.
Well,
That's the
hey,
only way.
that's the problem we're trying to solve at AMLIT, if you want to talk about that, because
Sure.
like in the European Union, in 2019, they came up with a copyright law, which is stronger than in the US. It's more protective for
Right.
individual artists, right? And last year, and they defined a term in 2019 called text and data mining, which is exactly, like these are like these companies are using us like, fossil fuels. And in last year, 2024, they basically defined it to say that these large companies cannot mine authors' copyrighted works without their explicit permission. And there's no infrastructure that exists for that. So AMLIT actually, which was designed in Europe based on a standard called the ISCC, which probably doesn't mean anything. It's like an ISBN for the internet age. And basically what the ISCC does is it can recognize any piece of creative content. It can recognize music, audio, books, poetry, and identify its original artist. And so what AMLIT does is it's created a registry. So your publisher could add your collection of poetry to the AMLIT registry. And if an AI company wanted to use that, either for scraping or for a more deliberate, considerate model of the other sort, you could tell that model absolutely not, do not, and under European law, you would not be allowed to use it. In the US, it's a little fuzzier, but in the US, we just had the huge Anthropic settlement that basically said to these big Claude that, yeah, you can use books to train your AI models if you must, but you absolutely have to compensate the creators. And right now, like there were a lot of flaws in that. Like some of the publishers failed to register copyright on those works, and those artists cannot collect from this big lawsuit. And so what AMLA does is it basically creates a piece of machine readable code so that an author can claim ownership. And if it's found to have been scraped, you have absolute legal standing to do that. But I think in the future, because of these giant lawsuits in the United States and because of the laws and regulations in Europe and other countries, that the AI models are absolutely going to be seeking like to use permissioned works only. And so we're doing it in a way that also it's like it's for indie authors. Every author, every publisher can own their own work. But you won't, we want this to happen and we want this to thrive before, say, Meta starts a registry and owns all this property because
Sure.
it's
I
a
mean,
lot
but I
like
mean,
the ebook rights early on.
I mean, there are a number of questions. I mean, for one thing, one concern I have is, once a piece of data is inside of a network, it's very difficult for you to say, oh, my data is in there, even if it is. Like, for one thing, like, I mean, it's very easy if there's, millions of writers whose work online has been scraped by this piece of data, by this network, and it's amalgamating them all. each of those writers isn't necessarily going to be able to put in a prompt that says, show me this piece of writing that reflects the fact that you scraped my individual data.
Well, they actually could. They could say, write in the style of William May, and if it comes out in the style of William May, that's pretty darn good
I mean,
proof.
but
You
I mean,
know,
like, that gets complicated because you also have the problem of the systems recognizing prompts like that and knowing how to respond. I mean, like, and I'm not talking, but like
yeah,
AI researchers have talked about the problem of testing AIs because AIs respond differently when they think they're
yes,
in test environments than when they're deployed
wow,
and things
yeah,
like that. That like fundamentally, like you could have a thing where it's like you ask it a question to do something that would show that it's been scraped of this data, and it knows that it's in a situation where if it demonstrates that data being in its data set, it's compromising its reliability or its deployability. And so it therefore, as a system that wants to, continue to exist, hides. I mean, we're getting very
oh, you're getting
high
really
level
deep, but
here, but
you
it's
know,
like,
and
I mean,
we
and I
can't
know there are
stop.
people
Yeah, and
listening
it's
who are going to be like, you're insane. This is paranoid and AI. But like,
no, you're right, and it's too late. I mean, all the stuff all the
sure,
stuff they gathered and pirated, it's too late. It's gone. It's in the system. The Atlantic did some wonderful reporting and was able to like create a database of
sure.
these pirated works.
Well, and there's
Um,
the YouTube database. There's a whole thing where you can go online and look up like a specific YouTube channel, a video, whatever it is, and see if it's been scraped into certain data models.
right. But I think what's happening now is that again, the lawsuits and the laws, at least, you're gonna say, well, people will do what they do with piracy. But it's, these companies are going to run into ginormous fines. They're going to get in legal trouble. They're going to be, there's ethical problems, and even in the last couple of months, actually, things are totally changing because now a lot of like ChatGPT can go out and search the web. So it doesn't have to hold in its database at all. It could go out and grab your
Right.
poetry, from a YouTube you did, so
I mean,
even
but
if it hadn't scraped it,
in a certain way, that makes it feel like, I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Westworld.
only a little.
Um, I mean, well, this is an old trope anyway, but there's a point in the show where someone shows up at like basically it's a I think it's a gigantic server. Helpfully enough in this analogy, but this guy shows up who represents it's Ed Harris, whether it's him specifically or one of his representatives shows up, and he's like, I want to take control of all the data. I want access to store all my data here, and I'll give you a deal, and you either take the deal, or if you don't, I'm going to get it another way. And they say like we're not making this deal with you, and the next day they're all dead. Like there's literally like and it's like there's a point at which it's like either you take our deal or we're going to scrape your data anyway, and you're just not going to get anything for it. And I know that's not you.
Well, I feel
I
like that's
mean,
the lawsuit. I feel like that's what just happened with Claude.
I mean, to some extent,
Yeah.
but as you said, like that's a limited. There's still a lot of people who are not going to be included in that, and there's a huge amount of other stuff beyond just the Claude.
Yeah, there's so much out there. It's just like, but what do we
Yeah,
do? I mean, how do I don't think we can turn away from it, but I don't think what's going on right now is sustainable. I don't think
right.
it's going to continue going at this pace. I think it's going to change. I think it's going to be more measured, more thoughtful. People are going to use AI in ways we don't even know yet.
I
This
mean,
year is
sure.
just really troubling.
And I mean,
So,
and I do want to be clear. I know that
yeah.
there are, even with large language models, there are people in the artistic communities who are using them in ways that are genuine. I mean, I certainly know recently I've been exposed to some stuff related to music genres where, in certain forms of black metal, where a portion of the goal is creating something that is alienized and sort of removed from the normal humanity of music using certain kinds of large language models
Hmm.
and neural networks and things like that is a way that people do this work that goes beyond what they feel they would be able to produce themselves and is still genuine to the kind of art that they're trying to create. There are
Yeah.
also people who create in a number of different communities, artists who are not real, whether you're talking about in Korea, the sort of vocalizer or Vocaloid stuff that goes on with idols in Korea, or where there are like literally digital characters who are given voices through AI systems and have, specific characteristics that are imbued to them largely by their fan bases, or other forms that are more specifically based on large language models. I know there are people creating music that is based in this stuff that is not, intended to be just a ripoff in the way that we normally might think of it. And
Right.
I mean, there are also people creating slop posts that are just there to.
Exactly. Like there's two things, and there are 2 points I kind of wanted to make about that too. Is just like when we talk about licensing, like maybe we can't control all the data getting sucked in, but we can definitely police and control output. So like if somebody tries to publish a book based on your work that you've registered, it will like if they try to register as well in the AI database, or they can be found, a match can be made and said, this is derivative work. It's not real work. And but to your point, really is like it's about quality, and I think it's always been about that. Like even when there were early ebooks, there were massive amounts of like out of date, old, like everything they could find in the basement, they published as an ebook, and it just like flooded the market. And
I mean,
a lot of
I
it
would
was
say,
crap. And
well, I do think that quality is an important aspect. I think it's also about intention.
you're right. And yeah, intention and discernment and a vision. Like you can ask, as an experiment, I asked AI to write me a bit of a novel. And it was terrible, of course. And and you can work on it, and there are certainly prompts you can use to bring things together. But it took me hours and a lot of thoughtful conversation with this AI before I got something I even liked. And that I feel is part of the artistic process. And like what you're saying too, is like these are new and evolving tools that can help us bring our imaginations and produce it in a way that we can bring it to people. Like I'm an AI optimist, as you can tell, but there are things I don't like about what's going on now, but I really think that it can help individuals, especially individual creators, both empower them on a business side with sort of this chatty help, but also offer new creative tools, or if they want to keep it out of their creativity, the way it's evolving, you're going to be able to tag your work and own it, and and if people take it, it will be another stream of income if you choose to allow it to go out. If you choose to make the deal with the data guy.
Sure. I mean, and
Who's not the devil?
in terms
Not
of
the
making
devil.
those deals, one question I have for you is like,
Mhm.
do artists have any kind of control at that point over the usages and how that, I mean, because like I might be okay. I mean, I don't know that I personally would be, but I can think of an artist who might be okay with saying, okay, I don't mind you using my data in, a static context where it's a piece of data that like you're creating a script for something, but I don't want my data to be involved in something that's going to become a chatbot model of some sort where like I'm directly talking, where my voice might be used by someone in a way that like isn't necessarily in line with my thoughts, or that I mean, I'm sure you
Yeah,
understand
I mean, but you can already like read somebody's book and quote them out of context,
Sure.
but it's not quite that fine grained yet, but you can
Okay.
definitely say like, yeah, I'll let it be part of the algorithm, pay me and I'll be like in your model, or no, don't do that. Or yeah, you can use my work for research purposes, but it may not be included in the output. Or yeah, you can output it, but it has to have permission attached and sources attached. Or yeah, you can use it freely, and this is how you need to compensate me. I
Right.
think to your point that it can definitely, it's going to evolve, but
Right.
I love that too. It's just like if I'm a poet, right, and my literary agent is licensing my work to be quoted in another work, I can say yes or no to that request based on that. And I do think that that's coming. That these requests will come in and you can evaluate and say yes or no. But you can't do that if there's no infrastructure, and you can't do that if there's no way to identify it to the AI producers.
I think one of the things that I'm getting from this is that you seem like you're kind of like, you're an advocate for AI, but you're trying to help authors understand it. And the key thing is registering their work so that if they are used, they get royalties. So you're
Correct.
coming in as an advocate, but an advocate for both. Like, it's here, but so let's make it work. And it reminds me of when they start sampling, when musicians were sampling in the music business, and also royalties now, how those were paid and how you get permission, how you can't use it for this and that. And it's really controlling your intellectual property. From my perspective, your particular stance isn't 100% clear, except when you said, I'm AI optimistic. And
yes.
so,
my stance, I tiptoe a little bit, but yeah.
I think I have a little bit of a perspective, which is that, like, on one hand, you're an optimist in the long term, in that you think a lot of the issues we're looking at right now are growing pains, and also sort of putting the cart before the horse in terms of
Yes.
a lot of the AI usages. But
Exactly.
even so, your intention is to sort of be a realist for writers on the ground in the current situation, dealing with not necessarily an idealized landscape, but a landscape that they have to still live in, even if it's as full of landmines as it seems at the moment.
Just like the whole publishing landscape. Yes.
Publishing right now is in every direction in trouble. I mean, we can get into that for a whole week. But,
yeah, we could. I've been interested in that for a long time. I do think our small independent presses hopefully will emerge as the solution, but it's a mess right now.
Yeah, well,
and small presses are also putting out a lot of content. I love what you said earlier on about content coming out. There's so much content everywhere. And I think that's what was so unique about publishing. But, like, through the years, even I would say in the early 1900s and then into the 50s, there was such a, to get a book published was, huge, and especially if it was a big press that picked you, because it's a pick. You like this, we'd like this, we think it can work. And it shifted a lot for that. Now it's just like, let's put everything out, throw it out, and let's see what sticks. And that's kind of what happens a lot in a lot of industries now, including music and film. And it's like, whoa, there's a plethora of stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think the big shift happened in publishing in the 90s, and it happened around the ebooks, actually, and Amazon. And the leadership in a lot of publishing companies, went from, the literary set, who had MFAs and were readers, to corporate people doing mergers and acquisitions. And in the whole industry, just like at the large side, there used to be like, there's 5 now. In the 90s, there were hundreds of medium-sized viable presses.
I think you used the Pac-Man. Someone used the Pac-Man analogy.
Pac-Man? Yeah.
And then they just swallow. Yeah. It's happening in medical. It's happening in every industry.
Medical,
music,
but AI is like that too. It's just taking all the content. But it's just like, and wow. I feel like this is a moment, but to me, it feels a lot like the 90s, and these companies swallowing companies to get the IP.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're also at a point where, like, we have the problem that publishing is very slow, and the kind of technology that we're dealing with makes it almost impractical for a lot of writers to go through the traditional publishing route, because by the time the book that they are working on or that they're shopping around came out through, Random House, or even through, a smaller press, it would be a book that, like, is years out of date based on, and I'm not even just talking about nonfiction. I'm talking about, like, novels that are based on trends. If I were a genre writer, and I were writing a vampire novel, I'd have no idea if it would be suitable in 3 years.
Yeah, but that's the paper infrastructure problem.
Right.
It's stocking bookstore shelves with actual, and that's not fast. No matter they couldn't make that any faster.
No.
So, e-publishing again, it's like the shit that the click that happened with electronic publishing.
I mean, there was at least at one point a discussion about on-site book publishing, where
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, I started my press with that very idea. Like the press I started in 2007 and lasted not that much longer because Borders went out of business, was entirely based on the concept of in situ printing using the espresso machines.
Yeah.
Explain it a little further. What that is? You mean like you just go on the spot? It's like you print.
So basically,
publish
the
a book?
idea is that like you would have a device that existed in a bookstore or whatever space it was,
Or a
that
bank or a coffee
could
shop.
print whatever book, I mean, not whatever book, but there would be a list of books that were available through that system, and you could print out a copy of that book. The writer would get their royalties, the publisher would get their royalties.
It's interesting. Like a vending
All that.
machine for books. Like
Yeah,
a
it
vending
was.
machine.
Basically,
was-
it's the
They
same thing
didn't
as
work
a 3D
very well.
printer. It's a
They
3D
didn't catch on.
printer model.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Didn't
that's
catch on.
interesting. It might work better now, actually. Maybe the world wasn't ready for it. But I want to ask each of you, after this conversation, to give your perspective of AI and also what you want the audience to take away. Like, if you're speaking mostly to authors, Julie, do you want them to register? What is your advice? What are your thoughts? And then Will, as a writer, as an author, first-time published author who's just been nominated for Pushcart, which
Yes.
honors small presses, for his book Blaze Without Burning. What is your message to listeners and authors? So let's say, Julie, please go first. What is your kind of rounding it up, your final statement-ish?
Yeah, my message to authors is be really curious and educate yourself a lot about what's going on with the AI. And protect yourself. Register your copyright first and foremost. Sign up for AMLET, but also, be curious about the creative tools as well, and have this conversation with other authors and your publishers.
Important conversation. Can you tell us what AMLET is, and is that the company you represent?
Yeah, it's this AI registry. It's global, based in Milan actually, but available worldwide, where you can get a digital fingerprint made of your book that's based on the content of the book. So if another person tries to register or there's a conflict, it will absolutely identify you as the owner of the work.
And how do you spell it, AMLET?
AMLET, like Hamlet without the
Like
H.
Hamlet without an
Yeah, it was actually
Without
named after
ham.
Ham. Without the ham, our owner felt like, I've been wandering 3 years in the wilderness, wondering how we can protect authors and not let this story end in a tragedy. And that's
Right.
silly, but that's sort of what he was thinking when he named this company. It's like,
And who started it?
Giacomo D'Alba, who is the Giacomo D'Angelo, who is the CEO of StreetLib, which is an international book distribution company,
Heard of that,
along with Titus Pan, who's German, and Titus is the programmer who came up with the ISCC to help artists protect the intellectual property of their rights.
Sure, it's like songs, ISRC, so I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Two
Very
things, two
interesting.
of them, the tech and the publishing guy came together.
Cool. And do you have a website?
It is amlet.ai, but you can also learn about it on my website, which is Paperbacks and Pixels.
Awesome. Okay, well, now let's do your roundup of this quite interesting and stimulating conversation.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree that people need to be informed about this topic. It's a very significant part of our current reality in both immediate and indirect ways. I think, we touched on some of that, including some of the economic concerns that are around it and some of the environmental issues for writers in particular. Personally, I think about my voice as a very deep possession as a writer, and there is something very spooky, I suppose is a good word for it, about the idea of that coming from another source, coming from, in particular, a machine. And that's something that's disturbing to me as a writer, to think about that reality being here in a certain way. I think I would ask writers to consider the proposition of giving that over to some form of or another as something serious to think about in a very deep way, and what it means for them to be to have a voice if they can do that. And I don't mean that in a metaphysical sense, but I mean in the sense of, like, you work very hard as a writer to get to a point where you are able to speak in a way that is your own. And if you're willing to just say, oh, well, I'm going to sell that to somebody else, that feels like it sort of reflects on you as a person in a certain way, not to be crass.
You're saying, like, if you're a writer, make your voice even more defined, so that when, in a way,
I'm saying, I mean, I don't think that's. I mean, I think that's a craft issue that, I think writers generally want their voice to be pretty distinct. But what I mean here is more in the sense of, like, if you're willing to sell your soul to the devil, how much do you actually value your soul?
Wow. Well, I have to make a point to that, though, just that the word to publish literally means to make public. And once a writer publishes their work, it belongs to the world.
Sure,
a lot of the
I mean,
scraping was people like
but there's a very big difference between my selling biscuits that I know the recipe for and my selling the recipe for the biscuit.
I see what you mean. Yeah. And I think that's right too. And even in the age of AI, like, if we make it a quality that we look for as readers in unique voices, and that maybe we as a community of writers and creatives need to educate consumers better as to, like, what to appreciate. Do they appreciate that individual voice? Because no one's going to copy somebody's voice if then they're a copy, right? Everyone should have a unique voice.
Sure, and I do want to point out that when I used the phrase, selling your soul to the devil, I don't mean that in a literal sense. I mean that more as a sort of, like, metaphor of what does it mean to be willing to sell the part of you as a writer that is kind of your unique,
that trains, that is the algorithm, the secret sauce. And to be clear, like, the registry allows you to 100% opt out. So you absolutely can protect.
I mean, I think this was more a general summary of the discussion of AI. And
for sure.
I do have to point out, I mean, I think, there are a lot of people who are, techno evangelists who are very gung-ho in a way that you're clearly more cautious and considerate about these issues. And I don't know, whether that's more a result of just the position you're in as a writer's advocate and a part of that, or if it comes from a deeper understanding of the issues, because I just don't know you that well, but I do appreciate it either way.
I was going to say, I think it's also Julie's background. I mean, she's been in the trenches with the writers, and her experience has shown how publishing has changed. And again, she gave us an actual era of the 90s where ebooks came into play, I think that's very fascinating, that once that happened, and then audiobooks and all that came into play. So I'm going to ask a question to Will. Has your opinion of AI after this conversation shifted at all?
I mean, I don't know that my position on AI has shifted so much. I mean, I don't think that, I don't think Julie even necessarily disagrees with me about a lot of the things that I'm pointing out. I do think that I do value the fact that, like, it seems to me that Julie's perspective on it is not as singular or one dimensional as a lot of the perspectives on AI that I've encountered. And that may just be a fact of, the people who are most likely to get their voices out there tend to be the most extreme. But I think that in general, I'm still pretty wary of a lot of the issues around AI right now. And I'll say that that's also, I mean, I was someone who 20 years ago, if you said to me, we're going to have AI that can, sit down and have a conversation with you, I would have been like, oh, that's awesome. That's I can't wait. And it's not like I don't have, I'm not a Luddite who's sitting here going like, technology like that is bad for us. Like, I would love to have a little robot friend that, is my little companion that, like Norby, the little robot from the old AI, Isaac Asimov books that he wrote about, like, where it's like you go on a magical adventure with a little tin man,
One other thing that you two have in common, because I can see, and the audience can't, but I can see in the blurred background, I think I see what I see. I think you're both very large cat lovers.
Yes, I have 4.
Right? You are. And Will has the best cat t-shirts I've ever seen.
I have to mention, like, I have a very silly, like, when I was first playing with AI, I made a website called Chats with Cats. You might want to look at it, because I've learned how to telepathically communicate with cats, and so I use
it's funny
AI.
you say that, but, years ago, the poet,
Here we go.
Broido, who unfortunately she passed away a number of years ago at this point. I was at a reading of hers, and this is going back probably to the late 90s. She had recently published a book called The Master Letters, and she confided in me that she actually didn't write the book. The book had actually been written by her cat, William Brock Broido.
Brilliant. Not surprising.
Interesting. Maggie?
Yeah.
Is it true or false that you also have a strong affinity to cats?
I do. My cat is actually, he has moved to the to the living room because probably it was too loud for him. And I do talk to him telepathically or not. He meows back, so
That's cool.
it's always fun.
Yeah, 3
Awesome.
cat people and 1 non-cat person right now at the
Wow.
moment. I'm more of a dog person, but that
can
means
say-
nothing.
I can set you up.
So in other words, if AI could send me a cat, I'd have a cat at my door probably. Who knows what,
The end of the
What-
cat delivery system. No, I'm actually looking right now for somebody who to take an Arabian Mau cats in the Saudi Arabia. They have one ready to send to whoever wants. It's beautiful, all white, big green eyes.
Oh,
cool.
That'd be good.
Anything else you want to share, Julie, before we sign off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always balanced tech and books, so I've been thinking about, since the early digital book world, I mean, it's a thing I've been giving a lot of thought to. But thank you also for letting me articulate some of this, because it also helps me process.
Oh, cool. And it's also
Yeah.
changes. I used to, someone I used to work with or knew of who in publishing used to say change is not the enemy. And so I think there's a certain amount
Yeah.
of staying open to change,
And I also think that, I just appreciate someone who has, who comes from your field, having the openness to have a more nuanced conversation that's not, proselytizing the value of the new in a way that isn't also reckoning with the concerns that are arising in the way that things are.
Thank you. And I was so excited to get a poet who was willing to talk to me, because I've been trying to do outreach to small presses and poets, and they basically say, AI, no, take me off your list. Don't contact me. Don't talk to me.
Let's discuss willing. Let's discuss, I will say Maggie as part of it.
Oh, did you he has to.
We did not broach this subject, briskly. We sort of tiptoed and and that's part of the story, right?
That AI is something that has come up both in our relationship, working together
There you go.
around things, and also more specifically that we've discussed it here on the podcast before, and some of my concerns.
Maggie, what was that
episode
date that we talked
Maggie?
about it? Maggie?
Episode 8.
yeah,
I think.
episode 8. We spoke with Denise about AI and other concerns for creatives in the 21st century, which was mostly about music rights, and I think you two touched on that.
So we've talked about this, so it's been awesome. Yeah. So I think
Totally.
that makes perfect sense and a great time to say au revoir for now. Thanks,
Okay, yeah.
everybody.
ARG, not Another Podcast About Book Publishing is produced by Denise Marsa, Maggie Dimitrova, and William May. Please visit WilliamMayWrites.com for social media links, recited poems, and more.